Motherfuckers, you listening to the Power Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I'm going back to snow. I know, it's strange as the season has been over for a long time. It's time for summer skiing, but the only place Americans should be able to shred is at Hood. I mean, if other countries are smart, they will ban U.S. travelers until there is a vaccine that is proven to work. Why? Because you can't trust Americans to do what's right. We are collectively idiots. And while I don't think I'm an idiot, and I want to believe that you aren't either, it's guilt by association. And our whole country is full of morons, and that's made evident by all the videos flooding social media with some Americans aggressively defending their right to not wear a mask. I think Forrest Gump said it best when he said, "Stupid is as stupid does," or something like that. I'm not even sure what that actually means, but it seems fitting for these times that we are living in right now. The shitty thing is, this thing is not going anywhere. Between the protests, presidential rallies, the people that don't believe in science, and everyone else acting like it's spring break every nice weekend, it's my opinion, and everyone should know that I have no medical training whatsoever, but my opinion is, things are going to be like this through the fall, and then when winter and flu season hits, it could get even worse. There's a lot of risk in this world right now. And most of my guests, well, they're fueled by putting themselves in risky situations. Take this week's guest, Austen Sweetin. He's a badass snowboarder who can ride any type of terrain. He's one of the best to come out of the Pacific Northwest in a long time. Everything he does for his job or passion or whatever has an element of risk. But if you talk to him about it, it's not as risky as it is calculated. And that's what we all need to be. Sure, you can live your life in this COVID-ridden world, but make sure you are calculated and you have a plan B if plan A doesn't work out. That's what the best in the world do when they're faced with risk. And now that everyone has to put themselves in harm's way on a daily basis, do what the pro athletes do. Manage that shit. We're going to talk to Austen all about risk management, but before we get into it, I want to let you know that my beer drinking challenge is coming to a close. I lost another bout against college roommate Chad Bryant that brought me to 30-2, and now it's all about the Grand Championship, where I'm going to take the two people who beat me, Matt and Chad. They're going to go against each other on Friday night. We'll get a winner out of them. I will play against them on Saturday to figure out who is the bestest, fastest drinker in 2020 on the Powell Movement. It was never my intention to drink 3 to 8 beers in a weekend in about 30 seconds, but that's what happened when I started the beer drinking challenge, and I can tell you the truth, I'm kind of happy that it's ending because it really was some weight on my shoulders every Friday at 5, whether I felt like drinking beer or not. I had to drink one faster than anybody else, and I was pretty good at it. But that is now in my past, or it will be in my past. I will let you know if I am the grand champion, or if Chad Bryant or Matt wins it. I don't know Matt's last name, and it doesn't really matter right now. I also want to ask you to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it, and support my amazing sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Stanley and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, let's talk with Austen Sweetin. You have a ton of nicknames, and before I get into the common ones, I might as well break the ice a little bit. And one of the nicknames I've heard you have is 10, and how do you get that nickname? What's the story behind it?
So that nickname came about when I was really young, beginning of high school. Through my high school years, I was riding at Snoqualmie every weekend, and I spent a lot of time with Austen Hiranaka, and we were on trips filming together. And like, he just one night was like, "We got to figure this out. Like, there can't be two Austens." He's like, "You're Ian, I'm Ian." He's like, "You're super young. Let's just call you 10. And then it kind of stuck. So like, everyone that's known me for a long period of time, they've all known me as 10, because I spent like my whole formative years of snowboarding with Austen Hiranaka. So it was just the nickname they gave me.
I figure one would be Asian Austen and one would be Little Austen. That would just be easier.
I mean, Little Austen was a nickname, but I think it wasn't like a good nickname, or it didn't have a ring to it. And that's when 10 came about.
But what you're known for is being the froth goblin. And it sounds like you're the dude that has to constantly be doing something. You can't just sit down. Does that ever bother people? Your constant energy? Are there some people that can't handle it?
No, I think for the most part, I've like surrounded myself around people that like to constantly do things and go snowboard, skate, surf, do whatever. So if there's someone that isn't down with the froth goblin, they probably just can't keep up. Maybe, I don't know.
Who in the snowboard world kind of matches your frothiness in terms of like the crazy need for your fitness and doing stuff?
Oh man, so many people. Honestly, over the last couple of years, someone that I've been snowboarding with a lot that like meets that high energy is Blair Hobenick. He is just always so fired up to go get it and go hike and film and charge. And then I did a trip with Griffin Siebert this winter, and he's like right on that level. Just like wake up, go snowboarding, go split boarding, spend all day, like be in the mountains till sunset, ride down. And honestly, Travis Rice, he just runs around like in the backcountry. You like halfway through like a little snack, like taking a 5-minute break, and he's just like, all right, let's go. And he's like running somewhere through waist deep powder. And like, how do you run so fast through powder?
I mean, there's just some people in the world that I feel like need, I don't want to call it fitness, because I think in your case, it's like you're skating, you're hiking, you're doing a lot of stuff. Do you run and actually do exercise as well?
Yeah, I actually took up running a couple years ago, and I go through waves where I'll have a month or two where I run 4 or 5 days a week, and then I don't run for a month or so. But I really like riding my bike.
Mountain bike or road bike?
Both. I have a single speed that I ride around, just like ride around town, ride to the skate park, do all that. And then I have a mountain bike. I actually like cross country riding where you're doing a lot of like up, you do a sweet trail ride down and then do another like long lap.
Yep.
It's kind of like split boarding, and you get that same feeling of just kind of like you're not in the mountains, but you're in the woods, which is very similar. And you get that like same feeling of freedom.
Yeah. It sounds like trail running would be right up your alley too.
Yeah.
I don't know if you started that yet, but I'm sure you'll pick it up in a year or so.
Actually, right when COVID hit, we were in Pemberton, and I bought myself trail running shoes because the only physical activity I could do was run the trails behind the place we were staying at. So for a full month, I was trail running probably 5 days a week. I would run about 4 miles, and then I worked my way up to running 10 miles. And that was kind of like my goal.
You know, there's an event series you can actually cash in on your trail running. Julian Carr has it in Utah if you really get into it. But we're not going to talk about exercise anymore because it's a global pandemic and you're not supposed to be doing shit. But in your world, you can't really not do shit. You have to have something going on. You have a piece of property on Vancouver Island, and you guys have been dialing that in. What have you been able to accomplish in the past 60 days?
The first 30 days we were in Pemberton, and since we've been up here, it's been awesome to just have, for the most part, the build of the container house is finished. So we've been doing a lot of landscaping and kind of more fun, unique projects like building furniture for the deck, trying to make a garden, trying to make things look nice. And then we've actually been really fortunate that we were able to surf a little bit. That was a real lifesaver.
From your property?
No.
You have to drive?
Yeah, we have to drive, but they were allowing people to surf, which was really great.
Gotcha. It's tough being handcuffed and stuck at home, but I've seen all the pictures on your Instagram, and it looks like you guys have gotten a shit ton accomplished, although you're just saying that you didn't get that much, but it looks like it. You got a deck that you just finished. Yeah, it looks great.
Thank you. The deck is the highlight. Like, just last night we had friends camp on the deck, and we went surfing today, and it's just like, it really makes you stoked, like, because it was such hard work to do and build all these things in time, and then to enjoy it with your friends and with Robin, it's just like, it makes everything so much better. You're like, oh, this is great.
And how long are you allowed to stay up there, given that you're American and you're up in Canada?
I'm just allowed 6 months on a tourist visa. So I focus most of that for the summertime. And then in the winter, I'm based in Glacier, Washington.
Okay. And then where you were based growing up, it was Shoreline, Washington. I think you have a sister and you have parents that love to ski. And when you're about 5 years old, your dad's like a beer league racer. And if people don't know what beer leagues are, it's kind of like bowling, but with people that are semi-athletic and athletic people. And you see your dad going out and you say, hey, I want to go to the mountain too. And that's kind of how you get on snow the first time?
Yeah, my dad was pretty much like beer league. He worked at Boeing. Him and my mom both worked at Boeing, and Boeing had a race league Friday nights at Snoqualmie. And when I was 5, it was like so random because I knew they went skiing. And I was like, hey, Dad, I want to go with you tonight. And he's like, yeah, if your sister's old skis fit you, like, come on with. And they fit. So my dad and I go up. Mom took me skiing, and I just like fell in love with it. And the next day or the day after, they're like, do you want to do this? And I was like, yeah, of course. I was so sick. And she was like, cool. Do you want to snowboard or do you want to ski? And I had a skateboard that I got earlier that year. So I was like, I want to snowboard because that's like the cool thing to do.
And you're 5 years old at this time.
Yeah, I was five or six. Yeah.
And you remember this too. You have an uncanny memory because most people I don't think can remember that stuff.
Yeah, like honestly, I have like this very vivid memory of me in the front hall of our house, like where the front door is.
Yep.
Having this conversation with my dad. And then the first night, I don't know what happened, but I convinced my mom to take me through the terrain park.
Uh-huh.
And she was like, oh yeah, we'll just roll over the jumps. But I didn't know how to turn. Like, it was my first time ever on snow.
Yeah.
And I just pointed it. Like, I didn't know how to pizza or turn or anything. So I'm just hauling, and I hit the jump. It was like probably a 10-foot jump, like super small. But I just flew and landed on my back. And I just remember like my mom skiing up to me, like freaking out, thinking I was hurt. And I was just like so happy and like stoked. And then, yeah, I think that's when I realized I was like, I want to do this.
And what's crazy is at 5 years old, your parents give you a decision like, hey, do you want to ski or snowboard? It happens to be the most important decision you're going to make of your entire life, even today. But you get to make that call at 5 years old, and it's shaped the way your life is.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, yeah, I was very fortunate to start that young, but I didn't get to snowboard a lot growing up. It was like once a weekend. And it wasn't until I was probably like 12 that my parents were like, whoa, he can actually like ride a snowboard and like really likes this. So then they started taking me a bit more, and then I started entering contests, and that's when the addiction to snowboarding started.
Did you play team sports when you were younger too?
Oddly enough, I played basketball, and then I played baseball and soccer.
Okay. Were you guys pretty serious about sports, and then the mountain was just like something you did for fun?
No, I wasn't. Like, my parents were very lenient. Like, I played sports, and then I actually quit soccer when we moved to the big field because I didn't want to run that far.
Your legs weren't long enough?
And then I quit basketball when everyone grew, and I stayed. I mean, I'm only 5'2", so who knows how tall I was back then, but like when everyone grew and then I stayed like 3 feet tall, I was like, okay, this isn't my sport. And I loved baseball. Like, if I had a team sport growing up, the one that I loved the most was baseball. And I played baseball until 7th grade or so, 6th grade, 7th grade.
You know, what I found interesting about you is it sounds like you were subscribed to Snowboarder and Transworld and all the magazines and stuff at a young age at like 8 or 9 years old. So were you into the scene that was going on, or is that total bad information?
I was subscribed to Snowboarder and Transworld. And I remember, I don't know how old I was, but I do remember I would tell my mom and dad stuff about something that I read in Snowboarder. And my mom was like, how do you know that? And I was like, oh, I read the article in Snowboarder. And she's like, you don't just look at the photos? I'm like, no, like there was a sick article on Kevin Jones and Genius. And he like did the monument rail in Tahoe. And she was like, oh, wow, I didn't know you actually read those. So it was kind of cool. I didn't read any books though, which I probably should have.
Well, most kids were reading comic books. It sounds like you were reading about the Forum 8 and stuff, because if you're born in 91, it's like 98, 99, or maybe
Yeah.
96 on is when that stuff's happening. So you're right there for that. And then with skateboarding, I'm not going to focus much on it, but that's a huge part of your life as well. And when you get into snowboarding and the culture of it, do you get into skateboarding just like you do snowboarding?
Yeah. So growing up, when I was really young, before I was really into snowboarding competitively, I was full on skate kid. Like I would go to the skate park almost every day after school if it wasn't raining. I was sponsored skating for a bit and did some local contests because skateboarding was so accessible for me.
Yeah.
Like I built a launch ramp and I could literally just go on the street and skate flat ground and do kick flips and stuff. And then snowboarding was like a bonus. It was like, oh, I get to go snowboarding this weekend. This is going to be awesome. I wasn't able to go snowboarding multiple days a week. So every time I got to go, it was like that much better.
And growing up in the Northwest, Hood is a place where everybody goes, or, all the kids that parents can afford it, they go to Hood.
Mm-hmm.
When was the first year that you got to go there? Because I think that's probably a long stretch of like being around a lot of great snowboarders at once.
The first time I went, I must have been 12 or 13. I went to spring camp at Windell's, and I was the youngest age you were allowed to go to summer camp. That was the first time that I got to go snowboarding at a resort for more than one day at a time or 2 days at a time. Like it was a full 7 days. And that was a huge turning point for me where I just got to ride park. And I remember my coach made us ride switch and like do all these things like that. And I just fell in love with it even more at that point. That was like the changing point where I was like, whoa, I want to do this as much as I can.
Is that the summer that you have Brian Fox as a coach?
No. So that was a summer later. And yeah, Brian was my coach. And Sage Kotzenberg and Blaze Kotzenberg were in my group. And I think Sam Taxwood was in the group too.
That's crazy.
And I remember we convinced Brian to hit the big jump, and I just cranked the biggest Tindy like you could possibly crank. And I got back up. I was like so happy, like 13, 14 years old, and just so stoked. I got to hit the big jump below the half pipe at Windell's, and he's like, hey man, you can't do that. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, you cannot grab your snowboard there. Like you have to grab between the bindings. And then I like learned how to do a proper Indy. But yeah, thanks to Brian, I'm not doing Tindies. So big shout out to Brian.
And it just sounds like your camper group there could battle like someone's signature week.
Yeah, I mean, looking back at it, yeah, I guess it could.
So you go to camp a few summers, and then you make the transition to be like a dish dog or digger or whatever you have to do to make some money and be a little bit older and be at Hood?
Yeah, so when I was 14, it was the last summer I was at camp. I think it was my third time at that point to Windell's. And I finished the session, and there was a guy that ran the kitchen. His name was John Kaiser. And he was like, hey, if you want to do CIT, he was like, you can do dishes and you can snowboard. So I did dishes for 2 sessions or 3 sessions. And then the next summer I did another CIT program. But yeah, dish dog it.
And is that like the lowest person on the mountain pretty much?
Oh yeah, like luckily I wasn't on morning dish duty, but I would go snowboard all day, get back, and then I would have to help with the prep for the Windell's kitchen. And then all the campers would eat their dinner, and then me and 1 or 2 other people would have to do all the dishes. And it was the best, worst thing ever. It was so disgusting, but I was getting the snowboard and it was worth it.
For the froth, I can imagine that you can do dishes, you can skate the skate park, and you snowboard all day long. I mean, there's got to be only like a little time for sleep, and that's it.
Yeah, that was the best part about it, is like you'd snowboard all day, you'd get a quick skate in before dinner, do dishes, and then you were probably done around 7:30, and then you'd get like a full hour, hour and a half to skate before dark. That was pretty much the daily routine.
Nice. And then you come back to Seattle for the school years. And at this point, do you have your snowboard crew? Have you already hooked up with Austen? Does that all happen before you guys get your licenses, or does that happen when you turn 16-ish?
Yeah, I was snowboarding with Austin and his little brother Jacob Krugmeyer probably from the ages of, yeah, probably right around 14 is when I started that.
Now it's time for me to take a sponsor break. And I love Stanley. They have been around for over 100 years, and they have always stood behind their products because they're the best. I'm not just saying that. I use the water bottles and pint glasses daily, and they really do keep things hotter and colder for longer than the competition. In my opinion, at least an hour longer. Stanley has supported the show for a while, and I want to keep it that way. So I'm asking for your help. What I want you to do is use my code with Stanley to save 30% on the best products on the market. What you need to do is head on over to stanley-pmi.com and go shopping. They have so many products over there, and hopefully I'll have one of everything at some point in my life. But you need to go shopping over there. You enter the code DRINKFAST, that's all one word, at checkout. You're going to get 30% off your Stanley stuff, and it helps the podcast as well. So thank you very much for that. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon, another brand that I love. And I know I said it about Stanley and I'm saying it about 10 Barrel, and both of those things are true. With 10 Barrel, they support so many different things in ski, snowboard, and bike that when I went to the store before they even sponsored the podcast, I would buy 10 Barrel just because of that. And then when they started sponsoring me, I realized exactly how much they actually do for action sports. They have an A-list team of athletes across ski, snowboard, and bike. They have a big money event series in their Hella Big Air events, and they give back money to the Surfrider Foundation and protect our winners. They do so much, and they have a beer for everyone. I find myself drinking a lot of Profuse Juice, a hazy IPA. Next time you're at the store, I encourage you to pick up a 6-pack of 10 Barrel and support the beer that supports the active mountain lifestyle more than anyone, the 10 Barrel Brewery. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Back then, it's just all park and rails, it sounds like?
Yeah, I guess it was park, but every time it snowed, we would be chasing powder at Alpentau.
But that's what you do on a powder day. I don't expect you to be in the park when it's deep out there.
Yeah, but growing up, snowboarding was kind of cool because when it was good, my parents would take me to Baker for POW days, and that was like ultimate treat. Otherwise, we would either ride Stevens, and I rode kind of the whole mountain because my mom loved to ride moguls. So I'd like rip moguls with her in the morning, and then she'd take me to the park for a couple laps, and then we'd go like somewhere else. And then, yeah, kind of around that 14-year-old is when it was a lot of park, just like hitting jump lines, trying to learn as many tricks as I could on jumps and rails.
And are you hitting urban stuff as well? Like, I mean, it rarely snows in Seattle, but I could imagine it's like a dream day when we get the foot that we get once every 6 years and you can go hit spots that you've always dreamed of.
Yeah, we probably had 2 urban days in Seattle growing up, maybe 3. 2 of them being full on, like when it snowed a bunch.
Yep.
And then I definitely went to the ice rink with Austin a couple times to set up like a 20 stair down bar in October.
That's what the young froth goblin does, dude. He fills up the back of a truck with shavings and he goes to a spot and he sets up.
We did multiple times.
Did you ever get into modifying cars and racing them like Austin did?
No, I never really got into cars or mechanics or any of that. I was pretty much dedicated to riding my skateboard and my snowboard.
One more Austin thing. So as things progress in time, it was like you two were on very similar trajectories. Like you both had your brands. You were with Forum, he was with Ride, and he was the bigger name back then, I feel like. Did it seem like he was going to be the guy that people were talking about from Washington back then when you were starting out?
Oh, yeah. Like, he was a full-on superstar at Snoqualmie because he was filming for Think Tank.
Yep.
And he filmed with them for years, and then we would go to Super Park together. But yeah, I just remember like constantly people being like, dude, you're part in Right Brain, Left Brain or Thunk or any of those videos. Like kids really looked up to him, and it was cool to see, and it definitely helped me get the motivation to be like, oh, like I want to be a pro snowboarder and like film a video part. So it was cool to have like an older friend that kind of was doing that, and I got to learn a bit from.
You guys were parallel for so long, then he pulls ahead and kind of becomes a big name, and then he starts plateauing, and when he starts flattening out is when your career absolutely explodes. Is that just like a surprise to you that you're able to slingshot past him, where you were on top of the snowboarding world right now and he had a great snowboard career, but it's not like he's full on 100% pro snowboarder anymore?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, he loves snowboarding, still snowboards a bunch. I'm not sure what happened. At that time, I was with Forum for so many years, and they had a formula, like, you kind of knew every year what you were doing, and it made it that you were always had something to do. Because it was like every fall, they'd get the team together and be like, all right, we're making another film. This is kind of the basis. We do the catalog shoot and then kick off the winter.
So if his career was managed better, it probably could have gone further, where like with Forum, you'd regiment this every season, where who knows what the program was at Ride if it was a little bit looser and he didn't have a schedule every year. Because it just seems like you guys were, and I really believe it's all credited to ability and work ethic, but you guys were on the same path for so long, and then you pulled ahead. That shit happens. But you mentioned Forum and getting on Forum, and before you can even get on that program, you're doing a lot of stuff locally. I think Crush is putting on a ton of events. It's the era of Rail Jam. Are you going to all the Rail Jams and everything that's happening in Washington?
Yeah, I mean, I would always do the Holy Oli, which was to this day one of my favorite events. It was a hand-shaped 20-foot quarter pipe that Crush and his crew would shape, and then it was right under the Oli beer can tower.
Yep.
And it was the best session because I was really young at the time, but there were years where before I was on Forum, like Peter Line would be there, Jamie Lynn would be there, and then you have all the Northwest kids, and it was a really cool blend of professional snowboarders and amateur snowboarders, and like Forrest Bailey, he was the dude at that time, like for the kids. Just seeing Forrest, like he had a pro model, and he was just king of Tube City, the tubes next to the big quarter pipe, and that contest was like such a staple in Northwest competition, I felt like. And then there were the downtown throwdowns, which were sweet. They did them in Pioneer Square in Seattle, and then there was one in Portland.
They had one at the stadium too, didn't they?
Oh yeah, there was one at Safeco Field. I forgot about that. And then there was the Nissan Tri Series, which was like the first contests I ever did at Snoqualmie, and then like the end sessions that 107 did, which were the sickest because it was at night and they had the stage at the bottom. And at that point, Summit West had two half pipes next to each other, and the Offspring was just like jamming punk rock at the bottom of the pipe, and it was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, that's amazing. But your big break comes through Crush, I feel like. There's a Forum shoot at the Summit, and Peter Line's there. I'm not sure who else is there, but someone breaks their face.
Yeah.
And Crush is there, and Crush is like, hey, dude, I've got this guy. We should call him and get him up here for the rest of the shoot. And that kind of paves your way to having a snowboard career?
Yeah, I mean, thanks to Crush, and then Pat Bridges was a part of that too. They put me in the right place at the right time to essentially get on Forum. It was right before Holy Oli. Snowboarder did these things called super sessions.
Yep.
And this one was with Forum. And it was Peter Line, Daniel Eck, Joni Malmy, Eddie Wall, and I think Cam Pierce was there. Crush just called me. He's like, hey, we got this shoot going on. I really want you to come up. And like Bridges sent me a text and was like, hey, we want you to come up and shoot for this super sessions. And I didn't really think too much of it other than just getting to go shoot and hopefully get a photo. And I show up, we were hitting a redirect hip, and Daniel Eck had just gone completely to flat, kneed himself in the face, and was just so swollen. And Pete was hitting this hip, and he's like, hey, you should hit this hip with me. And we got in a session, and we sessioned it for a couple hours. And Pete was just doing like the sickest methods on this redirect hip. And then I ended up getting my first sequence on that shoot. And then the team manager of Forum invited me back the next day to hit a step-up rail. And Peter Line was trying alley-oop backside 450s onto this thing, like the craziest trick. And I sessioned it with him again that day. And then I don't know what happened, but I think Pete was maybe stoked on me or something from riding. And he was a big part of putting me on. And then the team manager, Kevin Keller at the time, called me like a week later and was like, hey, we want to put you on Forum. And it kind of kick-started my career.
Do you remember like that first package of 10 snowboard, or probably not 10 snowboards, but whatever you get? Is that like a life-changing moment where you remember the FedEx truck coming and being like, holy crap?
Yeah, it was crazy because I got on ride snowboards when I was in 6th grade.
Oh, wow.
Then right before I was on Forum, I was sort of on the amateur team, and I rode for Oakley at the time. I stayed on Oakley for a couple years for just eyewear, and I left ride for Forum. And I remember because I would just get like a board, boots, bindings, a pair of goggles, and an outfit a year. And when I got my first Forum box, I was like blown away. Like they sent me so much stuff. I was like, didn't know what to do with it. And it was all neon pink and green and yellow. Like at the time, very suiting to like trends and stuff. But you look back and you're like, those are some of the craziest outfits that anyone has ever worn.
Yeah.
It's on par with some of the stuff they wore in the 80s with like the neon stuff.
That's ridiculous. And you're stoked. So now you've got a program, you're on Forum. And how long until you start shooting with Vacation? Because I feel like that might be your first real video project while you have stuff going on in the Northwest. Is that the first big project that you ever filmed for?
The first one was Fuck It.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And it was the year after I graduated high school. And I didn't expect to film a video part. I was going to Shoreline Community College, taking night courses, and I was working at Snowboard Connection at the time.
You also worked at Evo at one point, didn't you?
Yeah, I worked at Evo in high school for a couple years, and then I got on SnowCon and I started riding and working for them. I was like waxing, tuning boards, and I'd work the floor every once in a while. And then I got a call because to that point I was only doing park shoots with Forum. And they're like, hey, Stevie Bell got hurt and he can't go to Quebec. Like, can you fly to Quebec in 3 days? And it was right at Christmas time and I was closing the shop at SnowCon. And I just remember like talking to my bosses, AG and John Logic. And I was like, hey guys, I got this opportunity to like go on a filming trip with Forum in Quebec. And like, I don't know when I'm going to get back. Like I'm literally, they're booking me a one-way ticket to film. And they're just like, go for it. Like go film, whatever happens. We're stoked and you always have a place with us.
That's awesome.
And then I went on that trip to Quebec and filmed through New Year's. And then that trip just kind of snowball affected into more trips throughout the winter. And then next thing I know, like I only thought I was going to have a few shots. And then they ended up doing a full Youngbloods segment that was like the second part in the video. And from that year, every year it was like, all right, we're filming this movie. Like you're going to travel with Nick Save and Jake Welch on rail trips. And then you're going to go in the backcountry with Pat Moore and Jake Welch.
And what's it like going from shooting with your friends to going to like photo shoots with pyrotechnics and $40,000 park builds and crazy backcountry trips and shit that you've never been a part of before? Is it just total culture shock and like shows you what snowboarding can be?
I mean, yeah, because when I went on that first trip to Quebec, I had never been on a rail trip before. So, I mean, I could hit rails. Like I knew how to ride rails, but I had never gone and filmed in the streets. And we show up and Nick Save has a winch, a drop-in ramp, a snowblower. He has full 5,000 watt generator with 4 to 6 humongous studio like Hollywood lights. My mind was blown and like the creativity just started flowing. Like, whoa, you can literally get speed to hit any rail or any wall ride. And it just opened my eyes to the possibilities of street snowboarding.
Being on that Forum program, Does it make you feel like you have to do a lot more street snowboarding because you're a kid from the Northwest who, when it's going to be a powder day, you're not going to be in the park. You're not going to be looking for rails. You're going to be riding powder. And then you get on Forum and they're known for, yeah, they've got Devin Walsh and shit, but they're known for being like progressive rails, urban, street, park, all that stuff. Does it make you focus more time in that arena?
A little bit. Like at the time, it was a new thing to me, street rail riding. And it reminded me of skateboarding and skating in Seattle, like my whole childhood, just going street skating. So I really liked it and kind of fell in love with it. And I would go on a trip for 2 weeks and then I would be home for a week or 2 weeks and then go on another trip. When I got home, I would just ride Alpentau. So I was getting my powder fix between rail trips.
And then you're going on these rail trips, and I'd call it a phase maybe of 10 years of just focusing on that a lot.
Definitely. And then when I'd come home, like I'd build jumps at Alpentau with Austen and other people. And so that it was almost like while I was filming rails, I was kind of like putting a lot of effort into figuring out how to build a cheese wedge and hit a backcountry jump and land in powder, because I was always drawn to that part of snowboarding. Honestly, just like looking up to Kevin Jones, who just did it all.
Yeah.
To me, growing up, Kevin Jones and Peter Lyon were like the two boarders that I really looked up to. And I was like, whoa, these guys, like, they ride pow, they hit jumps, they're in the streets jibbing, they do it all. Like, that's snowboarding. At that point in time, that was what snowboarding was to me.
Well, it's amazing to be able to do all of them at such a high level. And then when you get on the Forum team, Pat Moore's on the team as well, and he's like that as well, where he does all those things good. And he's a real true professional. And what do you learn from a dude like that?
I mean, the biggest thing I learned from Pat was like being a professional and like a strong work ethic and what goes into filming a video part. Because it started with a couple rail trips I did with him, and he was just so on it. Like, we would scope spots, and then we would like make a plan. We're like, okay, we can hit this down flat down in the day. We can light this spot up at night. We can hit this spot at literally like 5 a.m. And he was just so calculated and knew exactly what he wanted to do. So seeing that firsthand, I was like, okay, this is what you do to film a video part. Like, it's not just showing up and performing. It's like, you got to find spots. You got to know like how you want to curate your part, essentially.
Yeah.
And then that same winter, the vacation year, we filmed a couple street trips in New Hampshire and Rhode Island. And then he invited me up to Pemberton to film in the backcountry with him and Jake Welch. And then just learning the program. At that time, there was still multiple crews in Whistler. Like, there was People, there was Mac Dog, there was Videograss, there was Burton, there was Forum, there was, I remember Quicksilver made a movie, and like Brian and all those guys had a crew, and like Volcom had a crew, and there's all these crews, and it was like, okay, we got to wake up at 4:30. We got to be at the trailhead, like in the dark, and we're going to this jump, and we're going to build all these things. And it just like blew my mind. That's what goes in to like all these shots that you know and love as a kid. You're like, yeah, Devin Walsh had the sickest back 7 on this jump, but then you learn like what went into that shot.
Yeah, they almost got in a fight with the other crew who got to the spot at the same time.
Seeing all this, because at the time I was 19 years old, you're like, why is there a shovel on that step down? There's a jump built and there's like a shovel, and you're like, why is there a shovel? And they're like, oh, like someone built that yesterday. They put a shovel in it and they claim it. And you're like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, a lot goes into this. So yeah, I owe a lot to Pat for like showing me what goes into like filming a video part and what hard work and a lot of effort can do for your snowboarding and your career.
Yeah. I think you nab your first cover in like 2010.
Yep.
Which is a pretty big deal that you want to check off the list. I'm sure that's really important to you. We won't talk about it at all. What we will talk about is, at this point in your career, you're living the dream. You're riding for a brand that everyone that was a kid in the late 90s wanted to ride for. Your heroes are now your peers. Everything looks super promising, and then it all changes. Forum gets killed by Burton. How do you receive the news?
Well, 2 months before Forum got shut down, we were all in Huntington Beach for a catalog shoot. And we all show up and the team was cut in half.
You didn't know that till you got there?
We didn't know that. And we were like, what's going on? And they're like, yeah, there's some changes. We had to downsize and like, this is the new Forum. And they're like, don't worry, like things are going to be strong. We have like a strong image that we're going to pursue this year. And we spent a month or 2 months down in Huntington Beach doing all these catalog shoots and brainstorming, doing all this stuff. And then I flew home, and then a couple weeks later, a month later, I got a text from Brian Knox, who was head of all Burton and Forum. And he's like, hey, are you free to chat tomorrow? And I was like, yeah, of course. Like, hit me up whenever. And I just figured it was like to talk about the winter, what they had in store for me or plans or whatever. And then the morning came and he's like, hey, I wanted to call you personally, but Forum's no longer. And I like didn't know what to do. I was kind of speechless because we had just came off of this big shoot of like, this winter's going to be a big winter. Like, we're making a movie. And then to just have it all pulled out from under you at a pretty young age too. I was like, whoa, okay. I don't really know what to do now.
And it happens at the worst possible time because it's like October when you find out Burton's shutting down Forum.
Mm-hmm.
And you're lucky that Peter Line has taken a liking to you. I mean, you're both smaller Northwest dudes who kind of have the same trajectory, I feel like. And he goes right ahead like the day he finds out and calls the dudes at Yes. He's like, hey, you need to call this dude. Austen is going to be your future. And then you hear from Yes like the next day. What's that conversation like? Do you sign right away?
I didn't sign right away, no. Right when it happened, they actually moved myself and Nick Sauvé to Analog. And then it was Mikkel Bang and Danny Davis.
When they do that, though, they pretty much fuck you guys all over again, because pretty much with Analog, they just wait another year, and they're like, sorry, dudes, you got to find another sponsor.
But they moved us to Analog, so I was like, okay, sweet. Like, I have a sponsor. I'm able to make it through this winter and film. And then I get the offer to film for Transworld that winter, which I filmed with Austin Hironaka that whole winter.
Yep.
So that December, I did a trip down to Mammoth. And Austin and I went down to Mammoth to kick the winter off, go snowboarding, ride the park, get our feet under us, get ready for filming. And I was kind of hopping back and forth between Yes, and I was actually riding some K2 boards at the time. And then I got back from that trip, and Max von Marbard, who was running the Yes program at the time.
And he did run the K2 program.
Yeah, after.
And now he's with your current sponsor. It's crazy.
Yeah, full circle. But he sat me down and was like, hey, like DCP and Roman really want to talk to you. Like, they want to make this happen. And then, yeah, David called me, had a long chat with him. And then I was like, you know what? Like, this is sick. Like, I like this. This is going to be a good fit. And then I ended up signing for Yes and riding for them for a handful of years.
I think you meet Justin at that point from Absinthe. Is part of the deal for them to buy your way into Absinthe? Or does that just happen organically after you sign with Yes?
That year I signed with them. They ended up sponsoring the Transworld video. It was called Nation. And then the next year, Justin had seen my part in Nation, and he called me. And he had a good relationship with Roman and DCP and JP Solberg from like all the years of them filming for Absinthe. And then he was like, hey, I would like love to have you be a part of the crew and film. And that was like a resurgence in my snowboard career again, because I had like this 2 years of kind of not knowing what to do, really, like the Transworld thing and then some other random stuff, but nothing too big. And then that happened, and I was like, oh yeah, this is like what I want to do. Like, I feel at home, like I'm filming a video part, and I was able to like kick off the year with Justin.
And when you go to Yes, you're going to a brand that's not really located here in the States, given there are some arms of it here in the States. but does that change anything in the sponsor relationship where at Forum it might have felt like a family because you guys are all tight and going on a ton of different trips, where it's a different program with Yes, or is it very similar?
It was different because the team was really small. At the time, it was Frank April, who lived in Quebec, and he was like just a rail rider. And then Helen Scatini, who lived in Whistler, backcountry rider. And then Roman JP, DCP, who were the owners, founders,
Legends.
and they were a crew. And then I was just kind of like a lone wolf in a way.
Do they even know what they get with you? Because they've seen all the street stuff that you can do. They've seen all the park stuff that you can do. But has anything come out that really showcases all the stuff you can do in the backcountry yet? Or is that to come and that develops more on Yes?
My part in Vacation was like my first backcountry breakout part. And then the year after that, I actually filmed a full backcountry part and it got cut the way the movie got laid out, and they only used my rail footage.
Well, bummer.
And I was bummed about that, but then the Trans World video was like the first year that I did kind of half and half. I was like, I'm going to ride street, but then come March, April, I'm just going to film in the backcountry. And so that's when I think the guys at Yes kind of saw my potential in the backcountry and in the mountains.
Cool. And while I'm on the topic of sponsors, I like to talk about salary a lot as well. And I feel like there's different levels of money in snowboarding. And I feel like you're on the A-list of riding. And while I know you kill it, you should be on that level in terms of dollars. But it looks to me like you're missing a couple key sponsors. Like, not that the Froth Goblin would ever need energy, but has there been ever a thought of an energy drink sponsor?
You know, I've never had the opportunity.
Have you ever tried on your end? Or is that not your style? Do you let people come to you?
No, I've reached out to the people that I wanted to ride for later in my career. But as far as energy drink goes, the closest thing I had was I had a phone call after a premiere tour for one of the forum videos. Ryan Runke was working at Red Bull.
Mm-hmm.
He talked to me a little bit, and there was like this slight chance that I could maybe get on, but nothing really came of it, and it just kind of fell through. And then I became really good friends with Brian Fox and Austen Smith, and then they do Drink Water, and I kind of just became part of their crew. But no, I've never chased after one.
I just look at those as the ones that create so many opportunities for any athlete, and they fill your bank account with a ton of money. You might have to create a message that you're not really believe in. So
Yeah.
It's a catch-22, but just curious. Another one that you could have that you don't is a boot sponsor. Do you have one?
No, I've been trying to get one, but they are not easy to get.
I mean, you skate, you'd think like 32 or Vans would make sense, but no boot sponsor, and you haven't had one in a long time, I don't think.
I've never had a boot sponsor.
That's crazy.
I would love a boot sponsor.
Yeah. Well, maybe someone will hear that makes boots and they'll talk to you.
But yeah, no.
You know, Analog, that whole thing ends, so you eventually connect with Quicksilver. And how does that one happen? Because it puts you on an insanely talented team. When you look at the Quicksilver roster, it has to blow your mind every time you read the names.
Yeah. So the same thing that happened with Forum kind of happened with Analog. I don't know what went on with the logistics or whatever, but they decided they weren't doing the Analog team anymore.
It was like all non-Burton brands, I feel like, because I think the Anon team got axed and a lot of teams did at that point. And then they got brought back on later on.
I know, and I remember the last year of my contract, I hadn't really talked to anybody, and I was still getting paid the little money that I got, and I got boxes in the mail every once in a while. But I was like, something's weird, like something's going on, and I was just kind of like, what's going on? Like, things feel weird, and then they axed it. And when that happened, I realized that I need to find sponsors that I'm passionate about. And that's when I felt like I needed to align myself with companies that I really wanted to be a part of. And I remember like making lists of brands, and I'm like, where do I fit in? Like, who do I want to ride with? Who do I want to spend my winters with? At that same time, like, I don't know what Brian did exactly, but he was like, oh, we should try and get this dude on Quicksilver. And then Todd Richards was down. and Quicksilver was at the top of the list for me. They were snow, they were surf, they were skate. They had an epic team. They've always had like such good riders on their team. And at the time, it was Brian Fox and Travis Rice and Mathieu Capel. And I was just like, that's sick. Like, I want to align myself with them. It's like a small core family. And then I actually turned down a couple sponsors as that was happening.
Holding out for Quicksilver?
Yeah, and it wasn't for sure going to be a deal.
You just really wanted to put all your eggs in a basket that you believed in. You're like, I love all these sports,
Yeah.
so I might as well be here.
And I would like talk to Todd Richards every week, and I was like, hey, is there like any news? And he's like, man, I'm trying. Like, I can't promise anything, but like it could happen. And I just remember I was just like, okay, if you want to ride for a company, if it's like meant to work out, it'll work out. And I just remember I was actually on a surf trip in Costa Rica in the middle of the jungle with like the worst service or internet ever. And I just get a text from Todd and he's like, it's on. And I just started freaking out. I was so excited. I was like, this is the best thing ever. And then it was like getting to spend time with Brian and Travis it's amazing. Getting inspired and having people to like help push your snowboarding and learn from, it's really incredible.
Awesome, man. And while I'm on the sponsor topic, what are the brands that pay you today?
Quicksilver, Mervin, Libtech and Bent Metal, Cole Headwear, and Ninja Suit, and Fatso Peanut Butter.
Oh, wow. You got a peanut butter sponsor. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Over the years, I'm sure you've amassed some money and you've done stuff with it. Have you bought any cool toys?
I mean, I haven't made too much money off of snowboarding, but I was able to buy a truck and a sled.
You have your property, right?
And I was able to buy a property with my girlfriend, Robin. And then it took me forever to save up, but I was able to buy a house in Glacier, which I'm so stoked on.
Congratulations. Yeah, that's huge.
Thanks. Yeah, it's kind of a dream come true to own a property. It's pretty exciting and scary at the same time.
Especially when you sign those like 800 sheets of paper with your name on it and all you know is that you have to make a payment for 30 years.
Yep.
So that's sponsors and money. Now we're going to jump back into the past and we'll talk about Absinthe. Do you go into that first year of filming with Absinthe with something to prove? Like Justin wanted to get you in the movie. You were able to do it through Yes, and now you have to prove to both of them that you belong?
Yeah, I mean, that first year, I was kind of between sponsors. I was off analog. I was riding Quicksilver outerwear, but I wasn't on the team yet. And Yes was giving me a little bit of support. And I funded pretty much that winter myself. And I was just like, I am going to snowboard and go film every single day. And Justin was so down. And we rented the basement of our friend and photographer Chad Chomlick's house in Pemberton. And we would just go snowmobiling every day, film all day, like whatever we could, whether it was snowing, cloudy, sunny. And then we spent 2 months in Nelson.
Is that where you got kind of like the JP section where you're riding the treetops and rails and all that stuff, which is always cool to see?
Yep. That's where we filmed that. And then we went to Alaska. And yeah, that year I give it all I got every season, but that year I was like, this is it. I was like, this year is either going to allow me to continue being a pro snowboarder and hopefully I'll be able to pick up sponsors, or this could be maybe the end of my professional snowboarding career.
Do you have any idea where you're going to be in the movie? Like, do you have any involvement in the production of the movie, or are you just a writer?
I was a rider, and then spending the winter with Justin, we had a double place trailer, so we were carpooling every day to the snowmobile zones. So like all winter long, we would talk about music. I'd be like, oh, this song's cool, or like this band's cool, or like this. So yeah, I got to help out. I got to pick my song, but I had no idea where in the movie I sat. And we had an editing session. We all went to Costa Rica to edit the movie.
Okay.
It was like Jason Robinson, Bodie Merrill, Wolfgang Navet, and Justin and Shane Charlebois were down there. And it wasn't till like the end of the trip. He's like, "Are you stoked? Like, do you like your part?" I was like, "Yeah, it turned out pretty good. Like, I'm stoked." And he's like, "All right, it's gonna open the movie." I was like, "What?" I was like, "Are you serious?" Even then, I didn't believe it. Even though he told me, but he just kind of like said it in passing, and then like got back to editing. And I was like, "Was he serious?" Like, maybe there's a chance, but I don't think so. And then it wasn't until the premiere that I was like, "Whoa, this is real."
Was the first premiere in Seattle or was it somewhere else?
Where was the world premiere? It was in. Remember, I went down to it. It might have been in Utah.
Because the Seattle premiere, I'm sure you were at it.
Yeah.
That thing opens up and people are going crazy for the first 7-8 minutes of the movie. No one's quiet the whole time because of you. That has to just be one of those things where now it probably gives you goosebumps. And back then, it's just one of the greatest moments of your life, I would think.
Oh, man. It's like, that's better than winning any award or anything you could ever win. The energy of the crowd in Seattle, it just made me so happy at that time. I was like, no way, like, people like this. Because I was friends with everyone and like I was in the scene and knew all like the boarders in the Northwest, but to see them share their stoke on that part and in that movie, it really just, I can't even put into words how I felt. I was just so happy.
That was pretty incredible. And then a couple years later, you go to the biggest part of your career as an After Forever. At this point, you've been a pro for a while. It's almost like a decade that you've been up on that level. You're like 25 years old, I think, and probably more of an adult. Does that change the way you go into the season to film for that part? Or is there no way that you can work any harder than you did for Heavy Mental?
How do I explain that? That year, I had a vision a bit. That was the year I did the Nelson street segment.
Yep.
And that was kind of like a vision that I had, like obviously inspired by JP, but then Austin Gillette filmed this skateboard part for Quicksilver actually, and it was called Quick Clip. And it was filmed and edited in all motion, so it seemed like it was one consecutive shot. And Justin had gotten the keys to the city to get permission to film all through Nelson. So we kind of set out to film that. And that was just one of the years where I had a vision for a part that I wanted to film. And then going in the backcountry, I wanted to do a lot of natural hits. And I was like, I want to try and hit a lot of natural things and try and get multiple tricks on each thing. So when the part plays, it's like shot, shot, shot. I just wanted it to have a lot of motion and like fast-paced action. But yeah, that's the hardest part about filming is like keep coming up with new ideas and ways to shoot and film.
You know, I look at it with Heavy Mental, it reminded me of Pat Moore's part in Vacation.
Yeah.
Where there is that full street section and then there's that full POW section. Was that done unintention, like as a nod to that dude? Or that just happened and it was very similar?
At that point in my life, I was really enjoying riding the streets and the mountains somewhat equally.
Yep.
And then, yeah, that was definitely, it was inspired by people like Pat Moore, Kevin Jones, Peter Line, those guys that kind of did everything.
And then After Forever, that's the one where you end the movie. And opening the movie's got to be a bucket list thing as well. But ending it is the big bucket list thing in terms of video parts. And is that one of those things you find out that you have the ender part before you go to a premiere?
No, I didn't know I had the ender that year.
So you actually go to a premiere, watch the movie, and see all these parts ticking off, and then you're like, holy shit, it's just me left?
Yeah, I didn't know what to expect. Honestly, I thought Cocard was going to end it that year because I spent the winter with him, and he was just on a mission that year. And I was so impressed with his boarding. And yeah, I was surprised. I was like, whoa.
So you get to check that box. I mean, you've checked all the boxes. I guess another thing, this isn't a box that you want to check, but this is around the same time that you meet Robin, I think, who's your pro snowboarder girlfriend, but also your sugar mama. How much older is she than you?
7 years.
Okay, so that's not that much older. How much taller is she than you?
She's got an inch on me. She's an inch taller.
And I would think with you and height, you're the small guy in every social situation in life. That's just happened in gear and everything. Does that ever create a complex for you, or is it just something that you just live with?
Just live with. I mean, that's all I know.
Because there's some people that have a chip on their shoulder and feel like they have to prove a lot of shit to people because I interviewed a guy named Simon Dumont, and he's height challenged as well. He said it was something that put a chip on his shoulder. Every time he did something, nobody said he could do it because he was too small. Did you hear that growing up? Like, you can't do this because of your size?
No one ever told me I couldn't do anything because I was short, but I definitely got made fun of a lot for my height.
Yep.
Yeah, there was definitely some years through school that weren't easy because not only was I short, but I was also the outcast. I went to a private school, kindergarten through freshman year of high school. So I was like the outcast skater kid. Like no one at my school really skated. No one really snowboarded. Everyone was like team sports and all that. And I was just like, I played team sports when I was really young, but then come middle school, I was out of team sports and I was just snowboarding, skating. And like I never got in trouble at school, but I definitely got like made fun of and picked on a lot for being the short kid.
Yeah, and that's just the low-hanging fruit for people because it's easy
Yeah.
to do. But, you know, if it gets you thick skin and it doesn't give you a complex, that's more power to you. The next thing in your life is you film another year with Absinthe, but then it's a Travis Rice project, Depth Perception. And when working with Travis Rice, it seems like he elevates everybody around him and makes them better, especially when you see the footage that comes out. What's different with him compared to the snowboarders you usually film with? Does he have an aura of confidence? Does he read the terrain better? Is he a super athlete? All of these things. What makes him different to work with?
All of those things. But I think the biggest thing is confidence. He's the most confident person I know. He has a vision, and when he's got something in his mind, like it's gonna happen. And when you're immersed into that, his energy rubs off on you and you get these boosts of confidence. Like if you're nervous, you're like, I can do this. It puts you in a place where you gain confidence and strength to kind of push yourself to a higher limit. And then he's really good at giving people opportunities. Like for instance, filming Depth Perception, filming a movie like that is something I've always dreamed of, but not necessarily knowing how to do it or how to get there.
Yep.
And then having Travis to just wrangle the crew, get the funding, do all the back work to like get him, Brian, Robin, and myself together.
I think this is like the 5th time he's done it.
Yeah, and he just like keeps doing it, and it's just like he's really good at helping other people, and you kind of feel like anything's possible when you're with him.
I look at this on paper, it's like Travis, yourself, Fox, Robbins on Roxy. So it's like you're all part of the same family of brands. And is it a branded project or is it genuinely inviting you regardless of who your sponsors are?
This one was a branded project, but we were all part of a crew and he wanted to do something with that crew. So us all being aligned with the same brands definitely helped us make that movie.
Okay. When you go through a project like this and you see Travis doing all the work and all the pieces that go into it, I'm sure that's what inspires a personal project of your own where you're like, hey, I know people who can do this stuff with me. I can control the way that my snowboarding looks and how I want this movie to look. Is that what inspires High Octane?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest inspiration behind High Octane was I didn't have a project to film for. And Quicksilver gave me the opportunity to hire a filmer and make something. So yeah, I was like, instantly I was like, okay, I want to go on a trip with Robin. I want to go on a trip with Rusty Ockenden and Chris Rasman. I want to film with Blair Hobanick. I want to film with Brian and Travis. And it kind of like allowed me to get a little insight on what it's like to make something. It was not easy by any means.
I can imagine you have a lot of different headaches that you never anticipated.
Yeah, everything from getting crews together, finding crews to go out with, and then getting funding, managing the budget, trying to make the most out of the budget. Yeah, it was a really good learning experience that I'm still figuring out.
And I think this is the same time of your career that things come to an end with yes. I don't know if it's before that or after that, and it doesn't really matter to me. It might to you. But why do they come to an end? You have a pretty good run there. Is it just time to part ways?
Yeah. Yes was a great sponsor and helped me for a handful of years, but at the end of the day, I was missing something and I needed to find that something. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and what it came down to was having a team to do stuff with.
Not being a one-man band in a video, just having a crew to actually session a spot with.
Yeah, like having people to go on trips with. That with Quicksilver, it was like you could do trips with Brian and Travis, and then I had that little crew that we were able to do some stuff with, but not everything. And I was missing this link of having a crew. And I've been friends with the Mervin guys forever. Mervin, in a sense, was always a dream sponsor of mine.
I mean, it totally makes sense for you. It's like your hometown brand.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you made a list back in the day and you were looking for an outerwear sponsor, you should have probably made that same list and looked for a board sponsor, and you would have been on Mervin from that day on. But that didn't happen back then.
No. And getting on Mervin, it took a couple years to get on. But when it worked out, I felt so welcomed to the team and the family, and I just felt part of like a crew, and I had people that I could talk to about ideas and boards and building your own boards and going to the factory and seeing how boards are made and getting your hands dirty and having like an insane team to ride with and surf and skate with. Even just going into the office in Seattle and shooting the shit and drinking coffee and talking about snowboarding and nerding out. That's what I was missing. I was missing that sense of home and family and crew.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And you have like a guest pro model snowboard that's coming out. It's the Sweet Banana, not the Skate Banana, which is pretty cool. And
Yeah.
that features all your photography.
Yeah, I got the opportunity to make a board graphic, my first one. And I'm not much of an artist. So when it came down to doing a graphic, I was like, okay, I love shooting photos. It's like one of my biggest hobbies and passions in life outside of snowboarding and all that. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go through my photos and I'll try and pick around in Photoshop and make a design. And then Annette at Lib, who does all the graphics, I would like send her these crazy Photoshop files with like the worst Photoshop lines, but like trying to make rough drafts, and then she would fine tune it. And she was able to take my idea in rough draft and turn it into a graphic that we were both stoked on.
Nice. Well, that was like the last box you need to check off, was getting that pro graphic right there.
I mean, yes and no. Like the last box is a pro model snowboard. I mean, that's the dream, I'd say.
Well, this is like step one there, though, right? Because the Sweet Banana
Yeah.
does have your name on it, and it's considered a guest pro model. Hopefully that goes into a pro model. But Rooster Tail is the last project that you just put out this year. You have an insane cast on it. Robin's in it, Fox, Travis Rice, Chris Rasman, Ejack's in it. This one really isn't about tricks, it doesn't seem like. There's a few jumps and stuff like that, but it's mainly cool slashes, and it focuses on making snowboarding look good. But more importantly, almost showing the stoke of everything. And the way it seems like you do that is by putting a lot more audio into that video. And by having the audio there, the real-time audio of what's going on in those scenes, it seems to create a level of excitement and fun that you haven't had in some of your other videos. Is that calculated of like, hey, we just need to show how fun this shit is?
Wow, thanks for that. Yeah, you nailed it. That was what we set out to do. With High Octane, we shot all Super 8. We're like, we don't have any audio. Snowboard movies without audio, it's kind of like not good. Like you need audio.
It makes it a lot better.
So going into this year, I sat down with Lucy and we brainstormed, like, what do we need? And I was like, we need audio. And he was like, oh yeah, gotta have audio. And then we were like, let's get up close and personal and let's try and do powder follow cams. The inspiration came from the way that people film surfing and how someone's coming down the line and then they get barreled, and the filmer submerges under the water, and then you see the fin fly by. And we're like, how do you translate this to snowboarding? Because it's such a beautiful part of surfing. And we were like, maybe we can like go to Japan and we can get water housing and just stick the camera in powder and then have it kind of come out of the powder as you're snowboarding. And we're just trying to figure out these ways. And then it just came down to essentially a lot of trial and error until one day Lucy was just like, we were trying these follow cams, and he's like, hey man, just try and hit me. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, don't be scared. Do like you're gonna do a powder turn. And he's like, if you're gonna run into me, just don't stop. Let's just figure this out. And that's how we started getting those like kind of up close and personal where you're coming into the lens and like doing the wraparounds, and then fully just like white rooming him out, and then coming out of the spray and doing those transitions. So we spent the whole winter filming, and then when we weren't filming, say we hit a jump, we were done filming the jump, we'd be like, oh, that's a sick face that's just like 40 degrees, like powder, like let's go. And we would just lap this face for hours trying these shots, and then
Just like turn and then set up again in 20 feet and turn?
yeah, kind of, but like on a little bit bigger scale than that. Then we were like, okay, let's take it into some pillow fields. Let's find features where we can do over-unders. We would kind of ride lines in the morning when the light's good. And then we'd be like, okay, let's bang out a couple follows and try and get a couple more shots. And so we picked away at that all winter long. And that was the basis of the movie. And then we're like, we'll mix in the other stuff.
Well, mixing in the other stuff must have been a total challenge in terms of cutting up audio and getting it in there, but it turned out amazing, and it's available online for free that everybody can see. At this point in the show, it's time for a segment that I call Inappropriate Questions.
Oh, gosh.
I get someone that you know to ask 3 inappropriate questions. Usually I record them and I play them back for you, but I don't think I was able to do that because I think the person that had the questions was with you at all times. It is your girlfriend, Robin Van Gin. And she's a badass in her own right. And I podcasted with her a long time ago. She sent over some inappropriate questions. I said I would read them in her voice, but I'm going to read them in my own voice. And they're not that bad, so don't worry.
Okay.
Question number 1. If you have to root for another snowboard dude, who would that be?
What do you mean root for another snowboard dude?
I don't know. That was her question, but I guess, I don't know, maybe who is the snowboarder that you most like to watch? I don't know.
Robin's right here. What do you mean?
If you had to root.
Oh, if I had to root? Like if I had to have sex with?
Oh, I don't even know that root meant have sex.
He didn't know what that meant.
Yeah. I'm American. Man. We say different words.
So root is an Australian term. Like, yeah, I had a good root last night.
Okay.
Like, it's such a bad Australian accent, but it's their term for having sex.
Okay, so she's got a bunch of sex questions. I guess which pro snowboard dude do you want to have sex with?
Pro snowboard dude?
Yeah, that's what she said.
Do I have to answer this question?
No, it's a podcast. You actually have free will. You can say, I'm not going to answer.
Yeah, I'll probably just pass on that one.
All right, so he's going to keep the dude that he'd most likely want to have sex with to himself. He's not going to share that with us. We will go with question number 2. Who would you rather have sex with, Oprah Winfrey or Roseanne Barr?
Oh my God. Roseanne Barr probably has the craziest accent. Wait, is Roseanne Barr from the TV show?
Roseanne. She's got her own show.
Oh, yeah. She's probably wild. Maybe Oprah.
I'd probably go with Oprah as well. And then her final inappropriate question, would you rather have teeth for pubes or pubes for teeth?
Teeth for pubes.
Yeah, I think so too, because if you had pubes for teeth, you really wouldn't be able to eat. But speaking of teeth, we're not going to let you off that easily. I believe you're missing your front 2 teeth. And what is the funniest thing that you've ever done with missing your front 2 teeth? Was there a way at one point to take them out and freak people out?
Oh, yeah. So I had they call it a flipper. And you could just take it in and out as you please. So like every time I brush my teeth, I would take it in and out. But say I was like at a bar or something, I would be talking to someone and they would look away or order a drink. And then while they looked away, I would take my teeth out And then when they would look back, I would like continue talking and like hold straight face like nothing happened, and this like totally freak them out.
That's awesome, man. Well, if you have to lose your teeth, you may as well have fun with it. I'm glad you've replaced them. And that's really the podcast. And looking at your career, it's like you're the Energizer Bunny of top-level pro snowboarding, but there's no drum beating on your end. It's kind of very humble. You come up being the little guy in a place where there are a ton of good riders, and it's easy for you to get overlooked. But you happen to turn out to be one of the most prolific riders to come out of the Northwest in quite a while. And it's cool to hear how your career grew into that. And I thank you for your time, man.
Wow, thank you. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure. This is my first podcast.
So that was time with Austen Sweetin, and normally I would have a lot to say about Austen, but it's been so long since I recorded this one that I can't really remember the conversation. I will say that I can't think of anyone as talented as Austen that has come out of the Pacific Northwest in some time. And it's refreshing that a guy with that much talent can be as humble and reserved as Austen is. And like with anything in life, you can't judge a book by its cover. When you see Austen, he may look like a little guy, but he's a powerful rider who oozes style. That's the show for this week. At this point, I want to thank you for listening, ask you to tell your friends about the show, and give me a 5-star rating on whatever platform you listen to me on. I also need to thank my sponsors at Stanley and the 10 Barrel Brewery for making this show happen. Have a great week, everyone.